the lady really tried to play model to me and was very kind, taught me quite a bit. Of course, I reciprocated by leaving all my weekly free cake and pastries with her because I couldn't possibly eat it all, but we all had to take what we got. And so I stayed there for several months and immediately started saving some money. I had $100 when I came in, which my dad gave me. I put them into the savings account, and every week out of my $20 I put in at least $10 into the savings account. Life was very cheap in 1928, and being single and still living much better than I ever lived in Germany, I still could save almost $10 a week. Of course, I had to buy some clothes to look more like an American. I was very conscious of that, and I did all right. Almost every Sunday or every 2 weeks or so, I called up Killian and they went out there, and they always treated me nicely. So everything seemed nice and quiet and sedate, except the foreman in the bake shop, a German. He started asking me if I could loan him some money. He was a nasty character, had been around quite a bit, was married to a prostitute, which I didn't know then. And anyway, he talked me and in fact applied a little pressure to get my savings because he had to buy a new car. He threatened that I would lose my job if I didn't help him. So I ended up giving him most of my savings, that is $100. And immediately I found out that that was a bad mistake because he had no intention of paying back, and he was getting pretty mean. In fact, he practically forced me to start living in his home. The bake shop then moved to Hackensack, New Jersey, and since I had to look for a new place to live, it was logic that I would move in with him. And I stayed with him for quite a few months. Along September, Nellie, my sister, came. I tried my best to be there when the ship came in, but of course I still didn't know how to get around, and I depended more or less on the newspaper. And there was a Sunday newspaper saying that the steamer had come in. I naturally got dressed and ran over to the nearest bus, got over into the city, found out that all the passengers had left the ship, went to Killian, and there was Nellie. Oh, she was very glad that I was there, and they told me how disappointed she was that I wasn't at the boat. But of course I was informed that even if I had been there, I still could not take her off the boat. It had to be a woman who had to receive her, because Nellie was only 18, 17 and a half in fact, and so they were very careful about letting any man take a woman off a ship. Anyway, Nellie was here and I was here, and things looked pretty good until about November, when work in the bake shop was getting kind of thin, scarce, and before long I was laid off. After about a week I found another job which required that I take a train ride or streetcar ride for about an hour every morning around 2 o'clock, worked until late in the evening, got barely 4 or 5 hours sleep, had to run back to the bus, go back and forth. Naturally, I knew that wouldn't last very long. But I worked until Christmas, got a Christmas bonus, had a little money, and never went back to that shop. Then right after Christmas, I decided I had enough of living in New Jersey and with that family, which at that time I found out was a pretty low-grade kind of a character. So I packed, found a room in New York, up there on Amsterdam Avenue, and moved in, started looking for a job. I found a job, bakery jobs always were available. After a few days I had one, didn't last very long. In the meantime, I had asked Killian if he couldn't get me into a upholstery factory because I wanted to go to night school. In fact, I had started night school, but I still had a bakery job. Anyway, things were a little tough right now. My money was really down to the last $5 gold piece which I got for Christmas. And I found a room in the Navy YMCA in Brooklyn. Navy YMCA was, as it says, YMCA near the Brooklyn Navy Yard, catering primarily to sailors. But it had a swimming pool, it had a gymnasium, I had a real small room to myself, had a restaurant there, and big social room, library. It had just about everything a young man could wish for. I really liked it. I think I paid something like $18 a month. And now I started working in an upholstery factory, furniture factory, on the east side of New York. It was now 1929, or probably February or March. Previously in New York, I really had a rather rough time, very little money. Very frequently I would go into the Woolworth store and buy some food, like they used to have cheap apple pies or some cheese. Anyway, I spent very little on food, but apparently I ate enough. So when I moved into the YMCA and I got a job in a furniture factory, things really looked up, and it was a great improvement over my previous few months. I still saw Nellie probably every weekend. She was kind of homesick, the poor girl, but she held her own. She did pretty well. Now, as for the YMCA, I mentioned all the facilities we had. And of course, I immediately started going to night school. It was some of these typical red brick building evening and night schools, Public School 15, near Flatbush Avenue and Nevin Street, I think it was. Anyway, I could walk it. It was probably a mile and a half to walk, but I walked it most of the time. Streetcars, they cost money, and I didn't take them very often. In night school, then of course, I met all kind of immigrants. What we really took up there was English and citizenship. We had one elderly schoolma'am, just like you see him in the caricatures, a real good-natured lady, and she would teach us civics. Did very well. Then she tried to improve our pronunciation of English by making us sing, and I learned a lot of the then popular songs, typical American songs, and I still remember the fun we had singing. We had another younger teacher, pretty good looking, and all the young men fell in love with her and tried to take her home in the evening, but her husband was there all the time, so not much to do. There were some pretty good looking other girls there too, and I started getting a little interested, but I really never could afford it, so I didn't bother with women very much. School was interesting. I learned a lot, but it was just one of the items which made life interesting. The job, upholstery factory, I would go over the Manhattan Bridge every morning. Most of the time I would walk, even though there was a streetcar going over. And then I would walk down to the east side, to the, at that time, all Jewish section. It happened ever so often that an elderly Jewish woman would stop me and ask me if I could read a letter from her son. Many of them could not really speak much English, and I could understand them, they could understand me, and I, by that time, had learned to read quite well. Living in the YMCA, I had to speak all the time. I must have had an atrocious accent. I still have, of course. But anyway, very frequently I would read a letter to one or two of these ladies who got to know me because I walked the same streets every day. And they would ask me to read a letter from their son, and then they probably would cry a little bit and say thank you, and stuff like that. And I would be proud of my knowledge of English and keep on going. In the furniture factory, I learned upholstery. I got only $15 a week, but out of these $15, I still saved about $3 or $4 every week. The room in the YMCA cost me $18, so that gives you an idea how much money I had left over to spend for food. But that's really all I had to spend. Clothes, I didn't need very many. I took good care of them. And for entertainment, New York and Brooklyn had museums, and I got to know every one of them. I knew Coney Island in summer because that's where I went swimming. I knew Museum of Arts on Fifth Avenue, Natural History on 7th Avenue, and Brooklyn Museum. They all were very interesting, and that's where I spent a lot of my spare time. In the YMCA, I met a Swedish fellow who had been in the country about as long as I and was about as smart as I, and quite a bit heavier and stronger. And I got to know him, and we would pal around for many years. Another thing I did in the YMCA is take up tennis. That really was a wonderful sport. Going out to Prospect Park, on the lawn, I had a key to the locker and I could put up the net, and I had some friends from night school who would take up tennis with me, and we would bang a ball back and forth. Great fun. So then in the upholstery factory I met some friends, especially one, a German by the name of Böhme, and he soon discovered that I played the zither. So I had to come up to his house quite frequently and play the zither, and I was there. His wife wanted me to come almost every weekend. In fact, it got a little too much as far as I was concerned, because his wife, I don't know whether she had any great ideas about me or what, but anyway, she wanted me there all the time, which at times was a little embarrassing. So that was a little experience with a woman. Nothing serious. It was still 29. Came Christmas of 1929. I got quite a number of friends in the YMCA. The directors, of course, were always after me to join discussion clubs. Came Christmas, I would entertain with my zither, and I played quite a bit there, and it was quite a nice place. I really liked it, and I never forget my 2 years in the YMCA. So that brings us up to 1929. Nothing great happened. I just had to work, go to school, save a little money. But by the end of 29, it looked like I would finish public school, which I did early, very early in 1930. And then I immediately signed up in evening high school. I went to the Washington Irving High School